You signed up for a free trial 3 weeks ago, fully intending to cancel before you got charged. You're only realizing right now, looking at your bank statement, that you never actually did that. If this has happened to you more than once, here's the part that should genuinely bother you. That wasn't a memory problem. It was a business model, and a very profitable one, built specifically around the gap between the version of you that signs up with the best intentions and the version of you that actually follows through a few weeks later. Let's start with the sign-up flow itself, because the psychology begins before you've even used the product. Starting a free trial is almost always designed to require the absolute minimum effort possible. One click, maybe a card number, sometimes not even that up front. Compare that to canceling, which frequently requires logging in, finding a buried settings menu, sometimes clicking through several confirmation screens specifically worded to make you reconsider, and in some cases, actually calling a phone number or chatting with a representative just to complete something that took 10 seconds to start. Researchers and regulators who've studied this pattern have a name for it: asymmetric friction, meaning the ease of entering and the difficulty of exiting are deliberately built to be wildly out of proportion with each other, and that imbalance is the entire mechanism doing the work here. Here's a curiosity gap worth sitting with. Why does the trial period so reliably end right around the moment you've genuinely forgotten it exists? Because that timing isn't coincidental at all, it's calculated. Most trial periods run somewhere between 7 and 30 days, a window long enough that the initial excitement of signing up has worn off and daily life has fully taken back over, but short enough that the company doesn't have to wait too long to start collecting revenue. That window is short enough to catch most people still distracted by everything else going on in their life, and long enough that the moment of signing up no longer feels recent or urgent by the time the charge actually goes through. Let's talk about the default setting itself, because this is genuinely one of the most quietly powerful tricks in the entire model. Nearly every free trial defaults to automatically converting into a paid subscription unless you actively cancel first. That single design choice, opt out instead of opt in, is worth an enormous amount of revenue on its own. Behavioral economists have studied default settings extensively across completely unrelated contexts: retirement savings enrollment, organ donation registration, and found the same consistent pattern every time. Whatever the default option is, an overwhelming majority of people simply stick with it. Not out of genuine preference, but because changing a default requires effort, attention, and a decision most people simply never quite get around to making before the deadline passes. Now here's the part that ties directly back to money psychology more broadly. Once a card is charged for the first time, something shifts. Canceling a service you're already paying for and have already used a little, even reluctantly, triggers a different kind of resistance than simply choosing not to start something new in the first place. This connects to a well-documented bias called the endowment effect, the tendency to value something more highly and feel more reluctant to give it up, purely because you already have it, even briefly. A subscription you've technically owned for one billing cycle starts to feel harder to walk away from than an identical subscription you never signed up for at all, purely because of that brief window of ownership. Let's talk about the cancellation flow specifically, because plenty of platforms have turned this into an entire discipline of its own. It's extremely common to encounter a retention offer the moment you try to cancel. A discounted rate, extra features, a pause option instead of full cancellation, all presented at exactly the moment you've mentally committed to leaving. This works because decision fatigue has already set in by the time you've navigated through several menus just to reach the cancel button, and a tempting last-second offer, requiring zero further effort to accept, is often just easy enough to say yes to that. A genuine intention to leave quietly turns into another month of paying for something you'd already decided you didn't want. And here's something even more subtle. Companies don't actually need every customer to forget. They only need a small percentage of people to miss the cancellation deadline for the numbers to become incredibly profitable. Think about it this way. If 1 million people start a free trial and just 10% forget to cancel, that's 100,000 paying customers created almost automatically. That's why the free trial isn't simply a marketing strategy. It's a conversion system built around predictable human behavior. Another psychological factor is something called present bias. We naturally prioritize what feels important today over what might matter weeks from now. Canceling a trial feels like a future problem, until suddenly it's today's bank statement. Most people don't intentionally procrastinate. They simply underestimate how quickly time passes. Life gets busy. Work deadlines appear. Family responsibilities take over. Notifications pile up. The reminder in your own mind quietly disappears. Companies understand this better than most people understand themselves. That's why reminder emails often blend into dozens of promotional messages. They're technically informing you, but they're not necessarily helping you notice. Notice something else. Many subscriptions charge relatively small amounts. $10, $15, $20, small enough that the first payment doesn't create immediate alarm. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as pain reduction through smaller payments, because smaller losses attract less attention than one large expense. Then another month passes, then another. Before long, you've paid for 6 months without realizing it. Individually, each payment feels insignificant. Together, they become surprisingly expensive. This is where habit quietly replaces intention. The subscription becomes part of your monthly routine, even if you rarely open the app, even if you've completely stopped using the service. Automatic billing creates the illusion that nothing needs your attention, and what requires no attention rarely gets questioned. Another interesting effect is commitment consistency. Once we've made an initial decision, our brains prefer staying consistent with that choice. Admitting we no longer need the service feels like reversing ourselves, so we delay the decision, not because it's difficult, but because it feels mentally uncomfortable. Companies also rely heavily on inertia. Human beings tend to continue whatever is already happening. A subscription that's already active usually stays active, simply because stopping it requires action, and action requires motivation. Motivation isn't constant. That's why cancellation is often postponed until tomorrow. Unfortunately, tomorrow has a habit of becoming next month. Digital products make this even easier. Unlike physical purchases, there's no visible reminder sitting on your desk, no unopened box reminding you of wasted money. The only evidence appears quietly on your bank statement, and many people don't examine every transaction carefully, which gives recurring charges even more time to continue unnoticed. Subscription businesses know recurring revenue is more valuable than one-time sales. Predictable monthly income makes financial planning easier and dramatically increases the long-term value of every customer. That's why so much effort goes into keeping subscribers from leaving. Every extra month significantly increases lifetime revenue. Even customers who barely use the product still contribute financially. From a business perspective, retention is often cheaper than finding new customers, which explains why cancellation experiences receive so much strategic attention. Some companies genuinely make cancellations simple and transparent. Others intentionally create enough friction to make giving up feel easier than completing the process. Regulators call these kinds of interfaces dark patterns. They're designed to influence behavior without users fully realizing it. The design itself becomes part of the sales strategy. Fortunately, there's a simple habit that works surprisingly well. The moment you start any free trial, create a calendar reminder 2 or 3 days before it ends. Don't rely on memory alone. Memory is exactly what these systems are designed to outlast. Another smart approach is reviewing your subscriptions once every month. Many people discover they're paying for services they haven't touched in weeks or even months. That quick review can save hundreds of dollars every year. Remember, every automatic payment deserves occasional reevaluation. Just because you agreed once doesn't mean it still provides value today. The smartest financial decisions aren't always about earning more money. They're often about paying attention to where your money quietly goes when you're not looking. There's also a pricing structure worth understanding, one that shows up right at the start of the trial rather than at the end. Plenty of sign-up screens present a monthly price crossed out next to a noticeably cheaper annual price, encouraging you to commit to a full year before you've used the product for even a single day. This uses the exact same anchoring principle that shows up on a discounted jacket or a fast food combo. The monthly number sets a reference point, and the annual number looks like the obviously smarter choice by comparison, even though committing to 12 months of a product you haven't tried yet is a considerably bigger leap than simply trying it and deciding month to month. The framing does the persuading before you've had any real experience to base a decision on. There's also the sunk cost layer that kicks in for services people have used even briefly. If you've spent time setting up preferences, building a watch list, organizing files, or customizing a workspace inside a trial, walking away means abandoning that setup entirely, and that abandoned effort feels like its own kind of loss, separate from the money itself. Companies understand this well enough that many trial experiences are deliberately structured to get you personalizing and investing in the product as quickly as possible, not just using it, because a customized, personally invested trial is measurably harder to walk away from than a generic one you never really settled into. There's one more layer worth knowing about, the reminder email, or more precisely, the frequent absence of one. Plenty of services are under no legal obligation to remind you a trial is ending, and plenty simply don't, or send that reminder buried among dozens of other marketing emails you've already trained yourself to skim past or ignore entirely. Meanwhile, the sign-up confirmation email arrives instantly, clearly, front and center in your inbox the moment you start the trial. The asymmetry that exists in the click-to-cancel ratio shows up again here, in which moments the company makes sure you notice, and which moments it quietly lets slide past unremarked. Here's the part that ties all of it together. None of these individual pieces, the effortless sign-up, the timed trial window, the opt-out default, the retention offer, the sunk personalization cost, the quiet reminder emails, would be especially powerful in isolation. Stacked together, they form a complete system engineered around one very specific target: the gap between your intentions today and your follow-through 3 weeks from now. A gap that exists in virtually everyone, regardless of how organized or careful they generally are. So the next time a free trial asks for a card number before you've even tried the product, the smartest move isn't just remembering to cancel later, because later you is precisely the version of you this entire system was built to outlast. It's setting a reminder the same day you sign up, before the excitement fades and the calendar quietly runs out the clock on your best intentions, and treating that reminder with the same seriousness you gave the sign-up button, since the company on the other end of it built an entire funnel counting on you doing exactly the opposite.